Good afternoon. I'm going to share this afternoon from Genesis chapter 39. I'm going to start back on 16, where it says, "And she laid up his garment by her until his Lord came home." Now, if you've just started listening to us, I was wondering if you'd know where that scripture was and what we were talking about. You know, that's a real good trivia question. And sometimes we play Bible trivia, and it's very interesting to see if you can figure out what story you're in just from reading one scripture. Well, this scripture is about Potiphar's wife. It's about Joseph. It's about how he ran away from her and she grabbed his garment, his coat. Seems like Joseph has problems keeping his coats, doesn't he? Coat of many colors, they stripped off of him, and now she's got his garment, pulled on it when she tried to catch him, trying to get him to lie with her, and he would not do it. Couldn't sin against God like that. And it says in verse 17, "And she spake unto him according to these words, saying, The Hebrew servant which thou hast brought unto us came in unto me to mock me." Mock her. I don't know what she meant. Being disrespectful, maybe she was trying to say that he was being disrespectful to her. In verse 18, "It came to pass, as I lifted up my voice and cried, that he left his garment with me and fled out. And it came to pass, when his master heard the words of his wife, which she spake unto him, saying, After this manner did thy servant to me, that his wrath was kindled." Now, he knew that the Lord had blessed his household for Joseph's sake. He knew it. He knew Joseph was somebody that was honest. Now, but here he is faced with having to either say, "You're lying, wife," or to do something about Joseph. Bad situation for Potiphar, huh? But it says his wrath was kindled, so he must have believed her. However she said it, he must have believed her. And Joseph's master took him and put him into the prison, a place where the king's prisoners were bound, and he was there in the prison. So no longer was he living in a really fancy house. This man that was the officer of Pharaoh was the captain of the guard. So the guard, of course, were the people that guarded the prison. So he was in charge of the prison. And so here he put him in the prison where the king's prisoners were bound. Okay, now verse 21. If you'll remember in Genesis, the beginning of Genesis 39, it says that, "And the Lord was with Joseph when he came to Potiphar's house." You remember? And he was a prosperous man. So that's what it said about Joseph when he got to Potiphar's house. Now let's see what happens when he gets to the prison. Verse 21. He was there in the prison. That was verse 21. "But the Lord was with Joseph." The Lord didn't forsake him just because he's going through trouble. Have you ever, everything was going smoothly and you felt like the Lord was all with you and you knew he was, and then some big trouble would happen and you go, "Well, where's the Lord?" Joseph's story tells us that is not the way it works. When you get in trouble, still, but the Lord was with Joseph. He was with him and showed him mercy and gave him favor in the sight of the keeper of the prison. So here is Joseph being in the prison, and instead of just being one of the prisoners, the keeper of the prison notices him and gives him favor because the Lord wanted him to have favor in the prison. "And the keeper of the prison committed to Joseph's hand all the prisoners that were in the prison, and whatsoever they did there, he was the doer of it." So Joseph was an assistant to the keeper of the prison, meaning he could pretty well do what he wanted to in the prison. And what he wanted to do was keep order and be there for the prisoners. And, you know, he was doing what he always did, what Joseph always did, causing things to prosper. Verse 23. The keeper of the prison looked not to anything that was under his hand, because the Lord was with him, and that which he did, the Lord made it to prosper. Whatever Joseph did, the Lord made it to prosper. So the keeper of the prison didn't worry about any of the prisoners anymore. He had an easy job after Joseph came on board, didn't he? Okay, we're going to go ahead and start chapter 40, because we haven't gotten into the deep part of this story yet. Chapter 40, verse 1, it says, And it came to pass after these things, that the butler of the king of Egypt and his baker had offended their lord, the king of Egypt. And Pharaoh was wroth against two of his officers, against the chief of the butlers and against the chief of the bakers. So, wroth means angry, wrathful. It comes from the word wrath. He was wroth, very angry. The chief of the butlers and the chief of the bakers. And he put them in ward in the house of the captain of the guard, into the prison, the place where Joseph was bound. So there's where Joseph was. He was really, I gotta sneeze. Sorry. I think that's the first time I ever sneezed while I was teaching. Well, anyhow, just a minute. It's getting calmed down. And he put them in ward in the house of the captain of the guard, into the prison, the place where Joseph was bound. So now we know where Joseph was. It was the same house, the house of the captain of the guard, who was Potiphar. The same house, into the prison. So the prison was there at where Joseph had been working all along. It was he put them in that place where Joseph was bound. And the captain of the guard charged Joseph with them, and he served them, and they continued a season in ward. Now, who was the captain of the guard? Let's look back. Potiphar. So here's Potiphar charging Joseph with the butler and the baker, the chief of them. Verse 5 says, And they dreamed a dream, both of them, each man his dream in one night, each man according to the interpretation of his dream, the butler and the baker of the king of Egypt, which were bound in the prison. And Joseph came in unto them in the morning, and looked upon them, and behold, they were sad. And he asked Pharaoh's officers that were with him in the ward of his lord's house, saying, Wherefore look ye so sadly today? And they said unto him, We have dreamed a dream, and there is no interpreter of it. And Joseph said unto them, Do not interpretations belong to God? Tell me them, I pray you. All right, now, what about dreams in Joseph's life so far? What about them? We go back to when he's talking to his brothers. Dreamed two dreams, didn't he? One, they were binding sheaves in the field. That's where they already got the grain. Now they're binding up the things that were left, the plants that were left. They were binding those sheaves. They could use them to burn. And they were binding them, and he said, Your sheaf stood around about and made obeisance to my sheaf. And then he dreamed another dream and said, The sun and the moon and the 11 stars made obeisance to me. So Joseph had dreamed those dreams, but he had not spoken of what he thought they meant. He hadn't told what he thought they meant. But today, in what we're studying, he asked the butler and the baker to tell him what these dreams were, because interpretations belong to God, and he was expecting to be able to tell him what they meant, because he had God in his life. Have you ever heard a dream that somebody had and you knew right exactly what it meant. I have. I knew exactly what the Lord was trying to tell him. Have I ever dreamed a dream myself and knew what the Lord was trying to tell me? Yes. But sometimes I've dreamed dreams and I don't know if they're from the Lord or from the devil. And then I don't really know what they mean. I don't understand. But, you know, some of them are scary dreams. And I'm not sure what to think about them. But every dream you dream is probably not from the Lord. But some of them can be. So Joseph wanted to know what the dreams were. And the chief butler told his dream to Joseph and said to him, "In my dream, behold, a vine was before me, and in the vine were 3 branches, and it was as though it budded, and her blossoms shot forth, and the clusters thereof brought forth ripe grapes. And Pharaoh's cup was in my hand, and I took the grapes and pressed them into Pharaoh's cup, and I gave the cup into Pharaoh's hand." And Joseph said unto him, This is the interpretation of it. The 3 branches are 3 days. Yet within 3 days shall Pharaoh lift up thine head and restore thee unto thy place. And thou shalt deliver Pharaoh's cup into his hand after the former manner when thou wast his butler. But think on me when it shall be well with thee, and show kindness, I pray thee, unto me, and make mention of me unto Pharaoh, and bring me out of this house. So Joseph interpreted the dream and wanted the butler to remember him. "For indeed I was stolen away out of the land of the Hebrews, and here also have I done nothing that they should put me into the dungeon." So this was not a pleasant place. This was down underneath the ground, the dungeon would be. So even though Joseph was doing the best he could there and was being very prosperous there, it was not a pleasant place. And he wanted to get out of there. And he wanted the baker to remember him. When the baker saw that the butler to remember him. And when the chief baker saw that the interpretation was good, he said unto Joseph, "I also was in my dream, and behold, I had 3 white baskets on my head. And in the uppermost basket was there all manner of baked meats for Pharaoh, and the birds did eat them out of the basket upon my head." And Joseph answered and said, "This is the interpretation thereof. The 3 baskets are 3 days. Yet within 3 days shall Pharaoh lift up thy head from off thee, and shall hang thee on a tree, and the birds shall eat thy flesh from off thee." Woo. That was a rough one to interpret, wasn't it? So we don't know what either of them did when they heard the interpretation of their dreams, because the next verse says, "And it came to pass the 3rd day, which was Pharaoh's birthday, that he made a feast unto all his servants. And he lifted up the head of the chief butler and of the chief baker among his servants. And he restored the chief butler unto his butlership again, and he gave the cup into Pharaoh's hand. But he hanged the chief baker, as Joseph had interpreted to them." So it came to pass just like Joseph interpreted. "Yet did not the chief butler remember Joseph, but forgat him." He'd asked him to remember him, but he didn't. Now, I've often wondered why the chief butler was restored and the chief baker died. It wasn't because of their dreams. It was because of what they had done, I think. I think Pharaoh discovered that whatever he had been offended by of the chief butler, that he wasn't guilty. And whatever he had been offended by the chief baker, that he was. So I feel like it was just because of the dreams, the Lord was letting the chief baker and the chief butler know what was going to happen to them. So we don't know what happened with when Joseph told them both of those dreams, especially the baker. It would have been really hard to hear that you were going to die within 3 days. and the birds were going to eat your flesh off of you. Been really hard. Well, I'm going to stop right there, and we're going to come back tomorrow and see what happened with Joseph. God bless you.